T1 has announced it is suspending its League of Legends team from streaming due to a continuation of the DDoS attacks that have plagued them for the past 6 months. Riot provided a temporary fix for the team during MSI, which seemed to have worked, but the attackers have found a new approach. If you can't take down the T1 players directly, take down their random solo queued teammates. Things are getting dirty, and the tension between T1 and Riot is really beginning to show. Before we get into today's video, I want to thank our partner, Acer. Are you looking for a next-gen laptop that lets you work and play from anywhere? Predator Helios Neo 16 laptop is equipped with a GeForce RTX graphics card and an Intel Core i9 processor and a juicy 400 nits display that runs at an incredible 165 Hz, so lag will be someone else's problem instead. And that's not to mention all the other perks, such as the 5th gen Aeroblade 3D fan and the AI-assisted noise cancellation that makes this laptop not just powerful but smooth as hell too. You can check out the Predator Helios Neo 16 over at bestbuy.com using the link in the description. For months now, there's been a shadow over the LCK and T1 in particular, an onslaught of DDoSing, the likes of which we've never seen before. Although it's been affecting players since last year, it wasn't until February of this year that the attacks on the LCK servers led to delays for over 6 hours and games having to be played on offline servers. After T1 got 3-0 swept in the LCK Spring Playoffs, Faigal told the media that the DDoS attacks on T1's facility had resulted in an unfair situation that left them unable to properly practice, and T1 also announced their players had been temporarily suspended from streaming. We also heard from General Manager Burke that Riot had given the players super accounts which had allowed them to scrim, and the situation looked marginally better. At one point, Faigal even said they'd had no disruption for 2 or 3 days, which isn't much, but it was something. The question remained though, what was Riot going to do to fix all of this for good? During MSI, Riot Korea released a statement in which they said they were unable to publicly share any findings of their ongoing investigation due to concerns that the DDoSers may gain information that would set Riot back to square one. T1's 3rd place finish at MSI had some fans complaining the team had suffered from their lack of practice, but in an interview with Dexerto, Gumayusi claimed it hadn't affected their MSI performance. He did, however, say that he was worried about returning to Korea as the DDoS issue had not been resolved and may affect their practice and scrimming. But by the start of this month, things looked cautiously optimistic. Becker announced that the team would be allowed to stream again for the first time since April. He said they've been working to improve their internal infrastructure and engaged in multiple meetings with Riot. Although he recognized the chance of more DDoS attacks, he said T1 were committed to providing its players with a comfortable and fair practice environment. 2 days later, at the LCK Media Day, Coach Koma told the press that the DDoS attacks had decreased after a recent patch, but that it was too early to say whether the issue had been completely resolved or not. Spoiler alert, it was not. While streaming last weekend, Faigal found himself in a game where, although he wasn't being targeted with DDoS, his teammates were. After his support repeatedly disconnected, Faigal's team eventually surrendered and he was forced to play Arena for the rest of his stream. Now don't get me wrong, I love Arena as much as the next guy, but for Faigal, it's not ideal practice for pro play. So it was clear that things were still bad for T1's players, and last weekend the org released a statement that sounded significantly stronger in tone than anything we'd heard from them yet. They announced that once again they will be suspending their players' streams due to ongoing DDoS attacks. They said that for nearly 6 months they had hoped Riot would devise a long-term solution to allow their players to train normally, but that regrettably, that had not occurred. They acknowledged that during MSI, a collaborative effort with Riot Korea had led to a security solution at their headquarters, but said the issue had since shifted, with the accounts of players playing alongside T1 players now being targeted. This carefully worded statement was trying to strike a delicate balance here. It's not a full-scale attack on Riot, but it is the strongest words on the matter we've heard from T1 during the entire situation. The following day, Riot Meddler addressed the concerns on X, stating that although they'd addressed a number of issues that had led to prior attacks on T1's HQ, the more recent incidents are different and so cannot be addressed by the fixes they put in place. He said they have a team in place investigating the latest problems and that the situation remains a top priority for them. So it seems that T1 and Riot are in agreement on one thing. This is something new. T1 players aren't necessarily being DDoSed themselves. Perhaps that means the system that Riot and T1 put in place did work to some extent. But now the attackers have simply found a workaround. If you can't take down the T1 players directly, take down their random solo queue teammates. And that sounds like a much more difficult problem to fix.
I don't think, this is going to sound really stupid, but I actually think Riot can't do shit. And this is just going to have to happen for the rest of the year. So, what does that tell you? There's a problem fundamentally with the game and the client where it's easy for the hackers to get the IP addresses of the people in the game, right? So how does Riot fix that problem? Well, what are you telling me? Are you telling me that Riot, I don't know how it works, I'm not an engineer, but does Riot need to recode the whole game of like solo queue and queuing up so that IP addresses somehow don't interact publicly? Like, that's gonna take forever. That's going to take months.
As ever, Riot have remained tight-lipped on how they believe the attackers have been able to terrorize not just T1 with these DDoS attacks, but the whole Korean server for quite a while now. They say this is to not give the attackers any information that could affect their investigation, and some people are on board with that. But in the absence of concrete information, speculation has continued to ramp up, and some of it is pretty compelling. YouTuber Raishu outlined a theory at the end of April that when Riot experienced a mass data breach at the start of last year, they exposed the code behind their Korean anti-cheat, Seon Code 3. One of the things this anti-cheat does is give Riot a bunch of information about an alleged cheater, including their IP address. The theory is that once this anti-cheat got into the wrong hands, the DDoSers were able to learn a player's IP address and drop their game from simply knowing their username. And if that is the case, Riot can protect T1's accounts and their headquarters network all they want, but unless they can do the same for T1's solo queue teammates, nothing is gonna change. It's all just a theory at this point, of course, but it doesn't paint a promising picture. T1 have seriously reached the end of their rope here. I imagine this is even testing the seemingly endless patience of Faigal himself. The ball is firmly in Riot's court now. What will they do next? What can they do next? Your guess is as good as mine. No, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to rank Beatles in terms of my favourites. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. I won't be taking any questions. That's the definitive list. It's done. Over.
Cool.